Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where the orchard of wisdom shows are at your fingertips. It ignites your soul, your heart, your spirit, your mind, and your body with illumination from people who have made the journey before you. They're here now to help you on your journey, on your path of self-discovery. We are funded by you, the audience, and the people we interview. If you wish to support us, please go to selfdiscoverymedia.com and press on our Fund Action button. Anything is appreciated. We'd like you to sit back and enjoy the shows. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Ignite Your Heart and Soul right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy. My guest today is Zen Benefiel. We are going to be talking about a lot to do today, a lot about, he says Zen is a resonance man with a new millennial mindset, one screwed towards harmony amongst women, amongst people and planet, which women, men, children, everybody. Zen is his given name. It was given to him, the one to be, and he was an adopted child that actually has managed to meet his real parents and have that experience. He's been through a great deal of Earth's life experiences. He's had a unique near-death experience. He's been a teacher. He's an advocate for children and everything that they need to learn, not what they are learning. He's way back had his own TV show where they had really deep conversations about life, about spirit, heart, soul, and everything else. So this is a gentleman that's truly lived his life in authenticity and done what he needs to do, and very much an advocate for the spirit. So today we're going to be talking about really how we're going to actually let the talk go wherever it needs to go. But let's start off with the flow of life, getting into the rhythm of life, and allowing life to show us what it wants us to do instead of always dictating from society's expectation of what we think we should do. Welcome to the show, Zen.
Namaste and in la catch, Sarah. Wonderful. I had so many words I was going to try and say it at that moment, right? The flow kind of got a bottle in. Wonderful to be here. Right.
Way back, I listened to one of your shows way back, and very much you're a person that's in discovery of self, in discovery of who we are, why we are. I am, we are, as you've got right next to your name there. That self-discovery, which the name of the podcast network is we're all in that, aren't we? We're all discovering, who are we? Why are we here? What are we here to do? What are we here to contribute? Who are we here to serve? And it's not just from the mind perspective, which I always look at as a great deal of wonderful knowledge. But if we don't tune in from the gut, from the soul, the heart, and the spirit wisdom, we don't know how to use that knowledge. And invariably, we use it in the wrong way. And we really need to go back and to listen to our heart and soul and spirit, because that's the compass, that's the guide. And if we tune in, we really can live out.
Absolutely. Now, up until recently, I think there's only been a few who've really been on the path of self-discovery because they've been so obsessed and attentive to the physical world and their own acquisition of stuff, right? Well, now that we're in a different phase of human evolution,
different vibration,
that's been prompted by the chaos that's been present on the planet. There's a silver lining in every chaotic moment, and there's even order in chaos that we may not recognize right away. What's happened, though, and one of the things I said to my wife and it first started was that, I really hope that this obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration will get people to turn inward and start examining who they are, what they believe in, what they want in their lives, and truly change their way of living. And so there's this new living awareness that's burgeoning. It's emerging in what I believe to be and experience as a natural order.
Yes.
Because it's coming from within us. There was a guy a long time ago who said, make the without as the within. Well, we've been bereft of the understanding of what's within.
Yes.
And those who have discovered it in the past were either burned at the stake,
Mm-hmm.
or hung, or crucified,
Mm-hmm.
or, all of those things, because they were an affront to the status quo and
Yes.
the way people wanted things. Even now, with what's been happening, there's a book Howard Bloom wrote called The Lucifer Principle. And in it, he did a scientific study of history and found out that throughout history, there was a small group of people who, and it depended on, wherever they were at, but the small group of people controlled the narrative.
Yeah.
And they would pummel the public with these outrageous lies, but they said it often enough and they had control of the media or whatever source,
Mm-hmm.
right? To the point where people just finally succumb to it. And it's like, okay, yeah, we agree, and then look at right now where there's so much
Oh,
disinformation
yeah.
that's being promoted as correct information, when all of the experts who have been trying to
Mm-hmm.
get their voices heard have all been censored or deleted.
Right.
So that's kind of a red flag that people, it's like, wait a minute, something's not right here. So that being the case, then where do we go? What do we do? How do we behave towards each other? And can we find that compassion and consideration in our everyday life? Like I started with the namaste and in Lak'ech. Namaste comes from the Sanskrit spoken, it's Brahmi, and it means the divine in me recognizes the divine in
Mm-hmm.
you. In Lak'ech, on the other side of the world, actually comes from the Mayan, and it means I am another you. Now, these are two ancient phrases. Sanskrit's the oldest language we're aware of, right?
Right.
So here we are with these tasty tidbits of transformation from the beginning that we've just been ignorant, or at least not paid attention to.
Well,
And now we're being forced to, because of the situation. And, the business world's revamped. The working world has gone from office to remote.
mm-hmm.
Huge shift. Now people can live where they want to
Yes.
because they're able to work remotely. And so there's this whole population shift. Maybe it's going to go back to the urban, from the city dwellers to urban and country folk, which might be a great thing, right? Because we've
Yeah.
been controlled by the corporate entities for so long. And there's this profit over people and planet agenda rather than a people and planet over profit agenda.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
it
I
doesn't do
mean,
away with profit, right?
mm,
Because we still have this economic system that we have to
mm.
survive in until we find something or create something better.
Yeah, it's changing it around, invest in the people and the planet, the profit will come, not the
Mhm.
profit at the expense of people and planet, which is the way we've been seeing it. And, from the beginning of time, there's certain people who know, keep the people in fear, keep the people ignorant, we can now control them. Right. And the last thing they want, in religion, in any of the power, is truth coming out of that you are your truth, right? Your truth lies within you. It is all around you. We listen to one another without the fear, but more with inquisitiveness, with wonderment,
Right.
with exploration.
One of my
But
guests called it psychological safety and intellectual humility.
mm-hmm.
And what that means is that you can speak your truth and not feel like you're going to be persecuted for it.
Right. Yes.
And you can also hear another's truth without getting triggered by it. You're
Right.
just able to listen and not feel like you have to change anything. It's their truth. And for them, you're not in their shoes, so you can't determine what their truth is. All you
It's
can do
the
is
different
acknowledge what
frequencies,
yours
right?
is.
Exactly. It's what vibe are you on, what frequency you're on. The higher the frequency, the more you've actually stepped into the frequency of love, where you can not knowingly do any harm to anyone else because it's harming you, right?
Right. And the frequency of love is really something, we, and I guess is probably a good place to kind of dive off into that near-death experience you mentioned
mm-hmm.
earlier. So in that process, I was in uh, my first year of college. I tested out 5 quarters going in. I was in the pre-med program. And in between first and second quarter, I'd gone home to ask my girlfriend from high school to marry me. And because I'd broken up with her going into school, thinking, I didn't want to suffer my integrity or damage her, or, be out of integrity in any way, even though I kind of was in breaking up with her. So I went back to ask her to marry me, found out she was already married. Went back to school, had this, okay, why am I here? Who am I? And I'd had it, since I'd found out I was adopted early, I developed this internal conversation with a voice that was impeccable in its delivery of truth and sometimes challenge, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So I hit my knees and I prayed to know what truth was, and I was willing to die for it if necessary. Probably one of the most fervent prayers I've ever made. Well, the following week on 11/11/1975, now this is before I was even aware of what the 11/11s were, right? So I come back from class, and it was the 70s. Okay, so I did the obligatory bong hit and album side meditation before doing my studies, and that was kind of standard, shouldn't have affected things in this way. However, I was listening to Journey's first album, the second song in between the vocals and the vamp, this voice I was familiar with. My given name's actually Bruce. I'll tell you how I got Zen here in a minute. I heard the voice say, Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in? And I paused for a minute and kind of, my whole body clenched because I wasn't sure precisely. And yet, first thing I thought of was Christ consciousness. It felt a little empty. Didn't understand why, didn't question it, moved on. Next thought was cosmic consciousness. It felt full.
Yeah.
And so I said yes. And as soon as I did, there was a guitar riff, sounded like a rocket ship taking off. I get a short or a small tug from my solar plexus, and I had plenty of out-of-body experiences, but this one was a little different. So I felt the tug, and I popped out of my body and turned to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed, turned back to look where I was going, and before I could get turned around completely, I was engulfed by white light. And it had this iridescent, effervescent, really high-pitched sensation. This goes back to that frequency of love, right? This was just total, unconditional, felt like home.
Yes.
And yet there was nothing else there. Now I realized I could think because I was analyzing what was happening. And as soon as I realized I was thinking, it's like, oh, I'm not dead. Cool, right? Then the impetuous teenager took over and said, wow, is there more? And I feel the movement of energy, and I'm in a indigo background with points of light surrounding me. And I intuitively knew these points of light were points of consciousness, whether embodied or not. I wasn't sure because I knew I wasn't. And then the voice picks back up and says, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime.
Yes.
Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Understatement. Have faith and trust that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And then I felt another rush of energy, and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air. And I kept my eyes closed for a little bit, just feeling that reintegration, for lack of a better. Now, what I got from that instantly was that we're all cosmic consciousness condensed form. We just aren't aware of it.
Right.
And so, that led into my quest for understanding dimensional, multidimensional worlds and having experiences that gave me, I was led into a process called the multi-level or multi-plane awareness technique that William Swigard developed back in the 50s, which took the participant through 9 planes of consciousness and accessed the body on each plane, integrated with it, looked out through its eyes, and then ascended on up. The 12th plane being the white light again, which is kind of interesting. So that was in 1989. And then Nepi and Close put out the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm in 2010 that, from a quantum physicist standpoint, outlined or their posit that consciousness, time, and space were tethered across 9 dimensions. So that fit. So along with the solfeggio tones too, or frequencies. So these kind of reference points were what I was looking for to be able to correlate some semblance of order in understanding how reality, the construct of reality is, and then finding my form, my perfected form, fit, and function in it, which kind of went along with the marching orders I got as a teenager. So I was led through all kinds of different industries and had all kinds of successes: aerospace, education, events, music, television, radio production, all these kinds of things where I learned how to get people to work together better. And I also had the opportunity to explore myself to find out how I worked better and what triggers I might be carrying, so that I can, take my finger off the trigger and just allow things to be and find that place within myself that, and with others and the planet, that was actually in harmony. And so that led to the understanding of living in quantum entanglement with a unified field. Years ago, that used to be called living in spirit. Right. So now there's science to back it all up. Which I find just so enticing, because now there's a way to talk about this from a left brain perspective that also includes the right brain, and maybe even triggers the corpus callosum to work, right? Because that's the membrane in between the two that translates.
As you were saying, that there is an awakening that in your lifetime you're going to see these changes, and I've had the honor, as I'm sure you have, of interviewing many of these people who have kind of immersed themselves. They had their own redirect, they had their own kind of near-death or death experience in one way or the other, and have directed on these paths that have been extraordinary and enlightening, and the permission and the allowing of us to rise up to a higher frequency.
What's really cool now is that the skill sets are aligned. So now many of us are older, because, like we were back in the 60s and 70s, we're exploring that to begin with. We were called the cultural creatives then. And so now we've got the skill sets, we've got the expertise, the experience, and maybe a little wisdom to recognize that, things are better when you can just get comfortable with the ambiguity and ask better questions, and then let those answers kind of roll out in flow as they do.
Right. For me, I've always been a dimensional traveler. In fact, it was extremely hard for me to live here on Earth. I love that space time where it is everything and nothing. It is all and everything. It's the word peace does not really encompass what that feeling is. And it is all knowingness. But again, only knowing what you need to know when you need to know it. It's understanding you don't need to know it all. You will know it when you need to know it, right?
You're plugged in. It's just being aware of that.
Exactly. You'll channel whatever you need to know when you need to know it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, when I was in the aerospace industry and went through a divorce and left the corporate world and got kind of booted out of the church at the same time. And so my life just kind of fell apart, which was the beginning of a restructuring.
Right. The redirect, we call it.
Yeah. And kind of, when you're in that place, when you first go through it, you don't really realize, because you're all constricted because there's change happening and you're uncomfortable with it. Well, when you go through it enough times, that you get to a point where it's here it comes, and you're more prepared because you know what's going to be on the other side. Well, one of the things that happens, I got really deep into the metaphysical community, and in meeting psychics and getting readings and things like that, there were all these people who just wanted to do it for me for some reason. Who am I to refuse, right? It's all information. It's just how we process it. Invariably, you're more comfortable. You're more comfortable out of body than you are in. Right?
Oh yeah.
So it's true, and yet, as I've grown to know myself better and become more integrated in this awareness that exists, right? That knowing, if you will, the effort to become more practical and pragmatic is just kind of part of the process, right?
Yeah,
because the question is, okay, how do I, phrase used to be, you're so spiritual, you're no earthly good, right? Well, the two of those are now bridging.
Yes.
And have been for some time, beginning of when the door opened for the harmonic convergence. that escalation of awareness and consciousness that went up to the solstice of 2012 um, was huge. And you could see it in books, references, CDs, movies, music,
Yes.
all of it indicated it. And then, so what happens once you reach the tipping point? You've got this new living awareness, it's embedded in you. So
Yep.
you carry it everywhere, right?
You
Whether you
are it.
realize it or not. So you carry it into your relationships, into your job, into your workplace, into the community. And that shift happens because you're there in the process. Now, on a global scale, it raises everything. It's the tide's rising, right? So all the ships are rising, and some of them are good ships, some of them aren't so good ships. And so this is kind of separating the wheat from the chaff, if you will, or the solid frame or the solid hulls from the holy ones, pun intended. And that this then is giving humanity the opportunity to see all the things that don't fit in the
Right.
natural order of things, all the contrived and control and command scenarios and things like that. And so there's this big push to try to wrangle everybody in, and that's what we're in the middle of right now. We're
right. Yeah, right.
dealing with that.
Yeah. 4 years ago, I was giving a saying, which is very appropriate for now and has been for the last 4 years and actually for many years. But, the universe is shaking us up to wake us up, for us to stand up, to change it up, but also to grow up. And the double entendre on the grow up is, grow up vibrationally, but also grow up. Yeah.
Right.
And with, many levels was still at the shaking up, but many people have risen up to step up and start changing it up. And they realize that however shattering all that everything is going on, it's like house cleaning. It's doing away with the old, it's deleting the things that don't work. So many people have taken that journey in now.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
It's like, I have time to actually have time with myself. What is working, and this outside living life is not working for me anymore. I actually enjoyed going in. I enjoy feeling like this. I enjoy my own company. I want to go do something different. And it's been a wonderful exodus of people pivoting into directions where they feel they are truly not only serving themselves, but realize that we are here to serve one another.
Right.
And it's wonderful to see that wakening up. Yeah, it's a wonderful wakening up. But of course, media, we don't see that. We only see the people that are shaken up and are rebelling against it, rather than the stepping up, because it keeps people in the fear.
Bloom's book, right? That media control is by those few who have the power and the money to do so.
Right. Keep people afraid, you keep them in control. Yeah.
Right. Now, and there's evidence of in this transition. I mentioned the Mayan calendar in the harmonic convergence, and that 50-year transition between the Piscean and the Aquarian age. Well, there's also the Kali Yuga and the Dwapara Yuga. And at the end of the Kali Yuga, that's where things are kind of dense and sticky, and humanity's not really growing. They're kind of denying that inner thing. Well, with Dwapara, then there's this turn toward establishing that interconnection and regrowing it, which there's evidence of in even in last century, where we've got different kinds of energy development, we've got quantum physics, we've got this new understanding of spirituality, we've got universal healthcare. All of these are signs of being in Dwapara Yuga, but the two still, as Kali Yuga is going out, Dwapara is coming in, so there's still that segue where that stickiness is giving us ways to grow.
Yeah.
So it's, you can see it from all kinds of different angles, and it's the living of it on a daily basis that folks, I think right now are having a struggle with, because they don't understand what's going on. They believed in one thing. They're finding out that may not have been the best thing to believe in.
Right.
And now they're in this place where, some are being threatened by their jobs. If they're not going to, take the jab, then you're out the door. Well, I don't want to put anything in my body that I don't know about, or I don't want to put anything foreign in my body that, period, right? Unless it's natural foods or things that I choose to ingest because I enjoy them, not because somebody's telling me to do so. and I'm perfectly healthy. I haven't seen a doctor in 30 years. Right. So, you see, when you live healthy, you think healthy, you feel healthy, then all of these things, interesting thing in spirituality, you think, well, I need to protect myself. Well, the ultimate protection is fearlessness, which is no protection whatsoever.
I know I've come across so many people where they're guarded with the spirituality. We can't tell anybody, we can't share it. Oh no, their frequency is so bad, blah, 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 block them, and it's like, no, the whole thing about spirituality.
It's about you, that's not about them.
No, the whole thing about spirituality that is so beautiful is that your very essence of you is a part of that collective energy. You are at one with that energy, and that energy will flow wherever it needs to go. It has no boundaries. It has no walls. It
now,
is
when people hear that,
going.
though, there's, back when I was heavy into the metaphysical and new age community, there was this woo-woo thing where this kind of language was used, and the rest of the general public, let's say, thought that it was kind of out there, right?
Oh yeah,
because there was this nebulousness about the concept of oneness, and feeling like, oh well, I got to give up my identity because
become the Borg.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the opposite.
Exactly.
Right. The more individuated you become, the better you fit into the all. Because you're developing that, I called it earlier, perfected form, fit, and function in the world. And when we live or step into that awareness that, something created us.
Yes.
And that something has, innately, we have a purpose or a frequency, if you will, that we are destined to rise to and be in, the I am, we are kind of place, no ego without we go.
Right.
So this kind of practical application is very pragmatic in the sense that it's a reality, and it doesn't have to be so nebulous, because as I mentioned before, science is even proving that, we're 99% space. Well, that consciousness permeates the space. And when you begin to acquiesce to an awareness of it and ask questions and live with the questions and not necessarily try to answer them with what you think
right,
that you grow,
right,
and new things come in, and your understanding, your experience expands, your love for yourself, the process, it kind of like Robert Gilman calls it, and this is a guy that's been at it longer than I have. He says it's about being in harmony with self, others, and nature.
Exactly. You are at one, right? I've
and
said that
it's embedded in us.
It is embedded in us. And, and I think it's up to us to discover, the analogy I use is, what is your instrument? When you discover what your instrument, well, no, your instrument, my metaphor, the instrument is, what is your musical instrument? How do you learn to play it? Now you look for an orchestra to play it in, where you can, in harmony and resonance, play it out. That becomes an invitation to a discovery of other people's instruments.
Kind of hard for a progressive drummer to play in an orchestra, though.
But then you find that orchestra,
that's my instrument,
or that group that is in harmony with you. And there is, we've got to get rid of this one size fits all, or there's only one way of doing something.
Well,
you take somebody with an instrument like a drummer. It's your versatility of that drumming, of how you feel, where it comes from, who moves you, who are you playing with, what's your audience vibration that's going to dictate the music that comes out.
And whether you're playing it as an instrument or as a timekeeper,
right?
There's a different feel to that. The instrument, you open up and you have a conversation with the rest of the musicians.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned and I said my body when you said, what is your instrument? I had a conversation with Jeffrey Mishlev several years ago, and one of the things that I mentioned to him is that our bodies are an instrument. We just haven't learned how to tune them up, let alone play them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because we live from the shoulders up.
Yes.
We're not in touch. And
instead of feeling our knowledge, we're constantly thinking it, and the thoughts are just constantly spiraling around like on a treadmill.
Yes, and all of those things that we don't want to deal with, we shove down into the body and wonder why we become diseased.
Disease, 100%. I say this all the time, and that it's about balance. And I'm a firm believer. The gut, I call that soul awareness. when it speaks you and it resonates with the heart in truth. It's your truth. You understand what it's saying. It goes to the spirit into action, and the mind will know what it needs to know when it needs to know it. If we can't
Right.
feel our knowledge, then we're only thinking our knowledge. When we feel it, we know what to do with our knowledge.
Right. Right. Now, it reminds me of that. Speaking of when things are coming, things will be there at their appointed time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was in the throes of my divorce, and I'd rented a house with a guest house because I knew I was going to be in the guest house soon. And I'd rented it to a friend temporarily, and we'd gone to a full moon meditation, came back, we're sitting in front of the guest house, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and having a deep conversation, and it felt quiet. And I closed my eyes, and I went inside, and I asked the question, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
And I hear his chair creak, and I open my eyes up to turn to look at him, locked on his eyes. First words out of his mouth, "You are Zendor." Now, second sight comes on as well. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. So, and my eyes weren't closed at this point. They were wide open. And the second sight still kicked on. I see this starscape with a huge stone arched doorway and a thick wooden door slowly opening towards me. And I hear, "Door to what is?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, you guys are such comedians, right? Zen door. Zen is kind of what is. So I put that on the shelf, didn't tell anybody. And then a couple of years later, when I produced the first round of One World, I used Zendor as my subheading under my given name. And about 6 shows in, one of my friends who was also on the set called me Zen.
Mm-hmm.
And it just cascaded
Yeah.
from there. That was in 1990. And it was tough for me initially because I had issues with people changing their name in the 70s. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to face that. And I've never legally changed it, but nobody calls me Bruce anymore.
Right.
And Zen is such a cool name to live up to.
Mm.
And the challenge of being in the moment, being present, not allowing, the external, instead of law of attraction, it's the law of distraction and interruption, right? Not allowing
Static.
that one to take charge.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very, very easy, when the older I get and the more I have come back to me. I mean, I lived a very separate life for a long time. I had an earthly life, and I was my spiritual self, and I was trying to immerse the two together, and the one was resisting, flapping in the wind, and it was a journey for me to kind of come back and be one and be whole. And when you're there, it isn't about putting up the boundaries or the borders or the this or that. Is that you want to resonate with people that are in the same harmonic flow, right? Because you're not interested in the static anymore. You're not interested in, the nails on the chalkboard or the hysteria, the constant tornadoes that are out there
And
of
you also
emotions.
become aware of your own,
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily discord, but cognitive dissonance, let's say.
Yes.
One of the things that was just a huge blessing, there was a cosmic conspiracy that brought my wife and I together several years ago. She's actually from St. Petersburg, Russia. So with my life being themed with harmony among people and planet, what a perfect partner to have than this, assumed enemy, right? Because that's what we're taught here in America, right. and always have been. Well, that's not true. And
they're perpetually looking for enemies, and they don't
well,
realize that they're our own worst enemy.
And people are people. You
Yes.
go to those places, and it's a much different
Yes.
experience. But
Try
still,
conversing.
though, with the different cultural upbringings and the different experiences, and even though she speaks English really well, there's still connotations to certain words that as we developed our relationship and we got closer, and it was really great because both of us worked out of the house, and she's a piano teacher, she's conservatory trained pianist. And so we spent 24/7 together pretty much. And that gave us the opportunity to really dive deep, have these questions and conversations and peeling back the layers of the onion to really get to know one another. And it was undeniable. People throw around the term twin flame. And man, I kind of longed for that. Be careful what you ask for,
Right. Yes.
because it's going to challenge every ounce of your being to step into
Yeah.
that awareness and be present and maintain that love and enduring patience,
Yeah.
right? And not just with the other,
Right.
with yourself, because
Yes.
every time you want to point a finger at somebody else, you got 3 of them coming back
Oh,
at
if
you.
you listen to my shows, that's a reference I make all the time. And you know, after my divorce, I
Oh, my dad told me that.
I've been using it
Teenager.
for years, you know.
Yeah, right.
But it's you know, I had a relationship, and it started off as a friendship, and it really was kind of an incredibly spiritual person that was in his cave. He was too scared to come out. And you know, my job in life has always been to awaken that soul and that spirit into being, and you know, slowly pulled him out. An absolute genius, an incredible mind, and everything utterly totally in tuned with the energy.
Mhm.
But the more he immersed into that, um kind of the less of the good human he became, if you know what I mean. So it changed him so completely that he kind of didn't have any attachment to kind of the reality of living as a human anymore. Incredible source, but wonderful for me in a sense that it helped me open back up again into being who I was, because
Mhm.
I was on that journey of self-discovery again, because I had switched down for so many years and kind of lost the connection to soul. And it was opened that back up again and allowed me to become who Sarah is, without again without any need of verification or validation from anyone else. But it is interesting how for some people it really does open them up into their beingness, and for some people get so lost in it they kind of lose a part of themselves as
Right,
well.
right. Well, for us, it, we were both interested in quantum physics, and she
Mm-hmm.
had just dove into Tom Campbell's work.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gave us a springboard to begin from. And then as we were growing our relationship, we based it on faith, love, and trust. That was
Mm-hmm.
our 3 pillars that anytime any conflicts would come up, one of us would consciously say, hey, let's chill out and
Yeah.
return, right? And then begin again, kind of like with the beginner's mind scenario. Well, as we started noticing things, and the closer we got, especially in those moments of um, where we didn't know who was who, right? We
Right.
were so at one with each other,
Right.
and we were having these discourses, and there would be synchronicities around us. And so we began paying attention to those. And it could have been an electronic ding, it could have been a bird, it could have been a
Mm-hmm.
car. The universe is always speaking.
Oh,
And
constantly.
as we begin to listen to it, then
Yes.
that's evidence of the quantum entanglement in the unified field that I was
Yep.
speaking of
Yes.
earlier. The synchronicities show up. And as you begin to step into that even more, you were talking about flow, you can actually be in that place. Um, there's no push or pull in
Mm-hmm.
that place.
Right.
So there's
Right.
the impatient ones are going to have a challenge,
Yes.
because
Oh, the ones that like to have control are going to have a challenge.
oh
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And that's okay,
Yeah.
because that's all part of the process of you becoming aware of you,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can make those internal shifts and make better choices or different choices than you've made before, in order to allow that to be present in your life without the fears and the constrictions, right? Because when
Yes.
you're afraid, you close up.
Exactly. You block all the energy.
Yeah.
Right. You're not in flow. I have a genre called, you know, quantum spirituality. And I think the beautiful thing about quantumness is that it has opened up to the measure of spirituality. And scientists are now looking at, well, spirituality isn't all this woo-woo stuff. We can actually measure the frequency of love. We can measure this frequency of this. We're beginning to actually understand that it is all a science, this energy, and we're
Right.
all governed by it,
Yes.
and the different frequencies, the different levels, the different everything else. And it's wonderful because now we're seeing this, you know, instead of fighting to prove one another, there's an immersement of discovery, of understanding it even more. And
I
there's a
think it
lot
was
of,
David Hawkins that developed a scale for that, even,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm. You've heard of the Emoto water experiment, right?
I've met Emoto.
Right,
Sorry.
right. So do you
He
know
was here in
Yashiyuki?
Phoenix for, yeah.
You know Yashiyuki? His assistant that worked with him and continued his work after he
The
died?
interpreter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
had the honor of
Because
interviewing
Massaro
him.
he didn't speak any English whatsoever.
Well,
Um,
I've interviewed him a few times, and he's an absolute delight. And I put him along with Steve, Robert Williams, who used to be one of the Beach Boys, and his life took a totally different direction. And it's all about water and the frequency of water and the healing of water. And of course,
and what are we?
we are water, right? You know,
Right.
and the whole Moto experiment is showing that, you know, when you are negative towards water, that water will turn against you. You know, when you're positive, it is that crystallization of energy. And it, you know, the way we speak to ourselves is so extremely important. The way we allow other people to address
Right.
us in their vibration, because where does that disease and that discord come
Yeah.
from? It comes from the disruption
Yeah.
within us,
And
right?
if
So
you're a master of self-deprecation,
yeah,
maybe you ought to, you know, challenge yourself to be
yes,
a master of self-appreciation
yeah,
instead.
exactly,
Now, that doesn't
exactly.
mean you have to get full of your ego, because there
No,
really is no ego without we go, like I said
yeah.
earlier. That's part of what that doesn't make the ego bad, right? There's so many programs and things that, you know, want to shove the ego down or destroy it or whatever. Embrace it, love it. It's you, it's
Yes,
yours.
yes.
Now, what is
It's why is it so needy that needs all the attention? When you love it, it becomes less needy and less imposing on other people.
right, and it transitions into
Mm,
we go
yes,
because it's about everybody. A
yeah.
man's not an island unto himself, right? We've
Hmm.
heard that many times. So all of this is bringing us all back together as a collective unified field that's in support of one another. Now, how is that, or what kind of evidence might we see of that? Well, for one, there's in 2019, a guy named David Hodson began a group called the Global Regenerative Collab. And these are people with skill sets that are to die for, coming
Hmm.
out of the corporate world, and and this is virtual space, right? And he did it in December of 2019, as though the universe had something in mind or knew something was coming up.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this group, it's around 700 or 800 people right now, but they've all come together with the notion of developing better systems
Hmm.
and looking at things that are in place and maybe learning how to tweak them just a little bit, because we don't have to be so disruptive
Hmm.
in changing everything. Some things, the systems in place, the physicality, the world that we have may not change all that much. It's how we engage it and
Yes.
each other
The
that
order of it.
right.
You're right.
Right. Instead of trying to push things through, we let things come up and
Right.
bubble up, you
Yeah.
know. And just as we are children of the earth, we're children of the cosmos too, because
Yes.
what's Earth? Well, it's a planet in the cosmos. So, you know,
Yeah.
we don't necessarily dig deep enough into ourselves to recognize and engage that. And yet we have over this last 2 years, and GRC is one of the groups. There's several others.
Hmm.
There's regenerative projects, there's websites, there's all kinds of people that are coming together with that purpose of collaboration
Yes.
and communication
Yeah.
and being comfortable with the ambiguity. And even Otto Scharmer, who was part of the MIT, he and Peter Senge put together a series of classes called Transforming Business, Society, and Self. This was
Hmm.
back in 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
And there were 32,000 students worldwide. I was one
Hmm.
of them going through this. And Otto has what he calls the theory U, which is essentially learning how to what he calls co-presence,
Right.
which means, you know, kind of coming together, letting go of the stuff and asking the right questions, being open, and then creating prototypes with that new knowledge to experiment with how things might work.
Hmm.
Right. So there's all of these kinds of things that are happening that most of these folks that have been under the command and control scenario are oblivious to, or
Right.
have been
Oh, and
oblivious
choose to
to.
be oblivious to. I did a wonderful Let's Get Sync series, and it was about the emotional climate change for climate change.
Mhm.
And I got to interview people. I'm mostly kind of from Europe and Asia, a couple from from North America, but these are people that are going in and working with corporations, working with governments, working with industries on, you know, people, planet for profit, not profit at the expense of, you know, ambassadors, and they're all doing their work. Polly Higgins of, you know, of the genocide on Earth. Unfortunately, we lost her, which is such a shame, but her work is continuing on. But you know, all of these wonderful people, and they've dedicated their lives. You know, they've had their own redirections, their own epiphanies, their own reasons, and it's like we can still do business. We can still have, you know, things that we want in life. It's how we have them. Who pays for them? Is it the planet? Is it the people? Is it our consciousness? Is it our soul? How are we going to do this where we are respectful to the gifts that we are given, and that we in turn give back?
One of the things in answer to that, if there, I mean, there's multiple answers, but one of them, right, is that in the political scene, we need to choose our leaders better.
Yes.
We need to be involved. It is a system. It works. We've let it go. And we now see it's run by the corporations.
Exactly. Right? It lost its meaning altogether.
Right. That doesn't mean it has to be jettisoned. Right.
It has to be reconstructed.
Has to be retrofitted with the right people. Now, I've been running an experiment here in Arizona. You know how you get taps on the shoulder every once in a while. And I was kind of instructed to look and see if the independent party domain name was available for Arizona. And what I got the impression was like, no, it's not going to be available. You know, this is 2012 in June, I think it was. Sure enough, it was available. So I got it. And then I started crafting this kind of introduction to a potential third-party neutral by making sense common, by doing the right things. Now, the independent party does not exist in Arizona, right? So this is an experiment for self-initiating people to step up.
A template.
And to come together. I've got all the forms and everything that's necessary. It's a really simple process. It just needs the people to engage it. Now, in doing so, then that party and its platform can be a third party neutral and do away with the bipolar or bipartisan bipolarism.
And the lobbyism, and stop politicians being bought, which is really what we're at right now.
Well,
take it back to it's for the people.
Both the ego and the money that's involved, and yet
the power.
And so this has the opportunity for that transition to take place. It's just an experiment currently. I'm hopeful that there will be an interest, but those are the kinds of things that, you know, in our system to retrofit it. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Exactly.
We have to make the choices that we can't point fingers and say, oh, well, you're doing that because, you know, you got this. Right. We're responsible. We're accountable.
Exactly.
So we need to take, whether it's pride or honor or dignity,
respect.
Respect. We need to have that for ourselves and then act accordingly.
I think we've got to remember, you know, what is our why? Why are we doing what we're doing? And it's, you know, going back to, we are of service to one another. That is how we survive. You know, the village is only as strong as everybody's participation. It celebrates when good things happen. It's there for when bad things happen. And each person in that village has to be a participant to make it strong. And if we look back at what politicians are meant to be, is they're meant to be a collective gathering that is there for the people, to represent the people, to support the people, and to help the people be strong. And it's lost its identity because corporations with their lobbyists came in and started buying politicians.
It's been from the head, from the shoulders up.
And the bank
body
account.
politic has not existed.
No, it's certainly not about the people at all anymore. It is about the individual. It's about the insecure ego that needs to be, you know, it has been. And this is the time of change. This is where I say the universe is shaking us up. It gave us a 2-year pandemic that isn't going anywhere right now. We're very slow to learn as human beings. We individually have to do the working on our own deletion of what does not serve
Well,
us and step into
I'm going to
ourselves.
argue with you. We aren't so slow in learning, right? It's just when we choose to learn, we can learn at an
When we
accelerated
choose
pace.
to, but that
So
choice to, right?
I think that choice
The
has
choice
been,
to is can be very slow in coming.
and
And
now
that
that
can,
we have this event, it is here. There are people
and
who
those
are
that are,
choosing. Now, the
yeah, and they
interesting
are.
thing,
Yeah, there
there
are
was a
many that
guy
are. There's
from,
some that are certainly not, but there's many that are.
well, there was a guy from, and it's growing.
Yes,
I mean, you can see the droves of people that are out
yes.
in the streets protesting now around the world. That's huge. And it's happening as we're speaking, right? So one of the things that I found interesting, one of your fellow countrymen now, his name was Wilbert Smith. This was back in 1950s. He ran Canada's UFO investigation program,
Mm-hmm.
and it was funded by the Ministry of Defense. I mean, sorry, Ministry of Transportation. He actually had conversations with what he called people from elsewhere.
Right, yes.
And they gave him some insights about how we can develop.
Yeah.
One of the things they said is we don't understand nothingness,
Mm-hmm.
and that we start from a point of awareness and
Mm-hmm.
then build our reality around that. Speaks to the point of consciousness,
Yeah.
right? And that time is a measurement in the change of entropy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you consider, as we move into greater harmony, less entropy, that means we can get more done in less
Yes,
time.
exactly. More
So,
productivity. Yes.
right. So
Yeah.
this accelerated learning curve that we're
Right.
in, and the changes that can take place accordingly, is actually possible to do in the next 15 years by the time this window for the in the segue between ages closes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's kind of, it's not necessarily euphemistically, because it's all part of the construct of space and time and where we are in it. And
Right.
we just don't understand the intricacies
Yes.
involved with that. It's like, tuning our bodies. How do you do that? Well, you start off with good nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
exercise, and good thinking. I found out,
Plant your seeds, water them, nurture them, and make them grow. But be careful what seeds you plant.
right. Yeah. And be careful what you ask for, because you're going to
Exactly.
get
Oh, yeah.
it.
Yeah. So articulate what it is. And, that's the thing is, don't ask what you think you want. Ask how you want to feel. The
Right.
universe doesn't understand you want a car, you want this, you want that. It wants to know how you want to feel. I wish to feel this. I wish to feel that. I wish to feel love. I wish to be able to give love. I wish to be able to be of purpose. The universe knows how to answer that vibration and will
Mhm.
know how to show you that path. It's not about the objects. It's about how you feel, how you want to feel.
Right.
That's the
Now you
frequency they
mentioned
work at.
articulation.
Mm-hmm.
When I first had my spiritual awakening, the white light experience, man, I could not articulate that for beans.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it took decades of attempting to say the same thing differently
Yes.
before the listening showed up. And when I
Mm-hmm.
first started, a year afterwards, my parents committed me because they didn't get it. And even
Right.
the doc didn't get it.
No.
But I did see a psychiatrist before, right after the experience. Godsend. He, after a few visits, said, you're not crazy. You've gone
Right.
through a spiritual awakening. Why
Exactly.
so young? I don't understand it, because most people don't go through it till their mid 40s, if
Mm-hmm.
they ever do.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was
Yes.
1975, right? So the following year, I'm honest about, I got beat up at a frat house and ended up in the hospital, and my parents decided, okay, we need to kind of keep him safe for a while,
Mm-hmm.
because they were really concerned, and I suppose with reason. But when I shared my truth with the doctor there, I got DSM'd, and so I became what was a bipolar manic
Oh,
depressive
right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
paranoid schizophrenic, and they
Yeah.
put me on 500 micrograms of Thorazine 4 times a day. And instead of being a lump in the corner, which I should have been if it was treating what it was supposed to,
Right.
I was up playing ping pong beating the male nurses, and they couldn't figure out why. Well, I finally figured out what the doc wanted to hear and told him.
Yes,
And
exactly.
as soon as I did,
You can go.
miracle cure, right? They
Yes.
started weaning me off the Thorazine, but still, when I got out, I was so timid in sharing my truth that when I started to, I would quiver and shake so bad inside that my physical body would actually tremble. And it was so freaking embarrassing.
Yeah.
And yet I had to get through it. Right. So
Yes,
then
yes.
I started playing I had a couple of sets of drums that I bought, and that was part of the reason why I was outside of the dorm and got beat up. It had nothing to do with the drums, just because I had to move out of the dorm and I was looking for a place that night. And so I was in kind of a precarious position, and I'm kind of glad my parents did step in that regard. And I understand, they were, and it wasn't until I was a parent I realized the care and concern and the fright that we have for our children when they're in a precarious position, and all we want to do is protect them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can't.
No.
Sometimes we just got to let them.
Exactly. White light them and let them go and learn their journey until I love you. And when you're ready, I'm here.
So the articulation that took place from then to now, and of course, I've had, a couple of master's degrees and certifications as coach and facilitator and educator and all that kind of stuff. It taught me how to listen to my audience, whether it's you or an audience, and really tune into them and where they're listening from. And so there's this interactive process that allows us to really tune in, and by asking questions, by making comments, reading the audience, reading the person, and then being able to adjust accordingly. And that's where the gut and the internal mechanisms take over, as to, okay, this is how it needs to be framed, and the words just come out of your mouth before you know it.
Well, I've been doing that since I was a child, and I used to counsel my teachers, and then go like, "How do you know that? Know what? What you've just said? What did I say?"
It's so natural.
And it was just, and it was just like in that moment they needed to know that, and it was channeled through me. I used to play with dead people growing up. Who are you talking to? Who's this? And it's like, and it's and I would, I couldn't go past the graveyard without the conversations. And my dad died young, and different forms of presence, but there was nobody to speak to about this. My mom was very fey, so she in some point she kind of understood, but I was a very sickly child. And so academically I didn't finish school, but they kind of put it down to other excuses. I was just a bit of a weirdo, a bit of a far out, but it didn't stop them. I mean, one moment they would hate me, and the next moment come to me. And it doesn't matter where I go.
And the nature of the being.
I had this conversation with a psychic the other day when he was interviewing me. He says that he goes somewhere and he puts this energy around it that nobody will bother him. And I said, I can go somewhere and find myself the tiniest corner, and they'll seek me out. And it's just, I have what they need to know in that moment. And it's like, I can't argue with that.
And obviously you've got to be comfortable with that.
Oh yeah, there's no point in fighting it. There's no, if this was one of the gifts I was given, it doesn't mean Sarah's doing it. It is coming through me. It's just they've used me as a conduit for this information. I'm a possibility seer, so I'm a psychic reader, and I see what possibilities lie before you. I'm
laughing. Dudley Lynch, this is back in mid-aughts. I was working, Dudley Lynch is the president of Brain Technologies, and he developed the Yo Dolphin personality survey. I was working with him for a while. And he called me a possibilities coagulator. I thought, how cool is that?
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, coagulator, right? I just keep it simple as seer, and I've done it on shows where I'm talking to people, and suddenly I just see everything, and I say, I'm sorry, but this is, and it's not. It has to come out. I can't restrain it because it's beyond me.
Right. And I don't necessarily understand what's going on here, but here's what I'm getting.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's just like, this is the possibility that I see. Whether they do it is up to them. That's not up to me. All I'm there is just partake.
The newest term that I got was from a gentleman named Eric Zabielski, a doctoral level guy. He's a systems analyst and systems engineering kind of guy. But he called me an organizational bricklayer. Right. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right. I had to look it up. It's very rare that somebody will give me a term that I don't
Right.
understand. And
Well,
so I went and looked it
my
up, and I
sister
thought,
doesn't understand a thing that I do. And so she called me a do-gooder communist.
yeah. Well,
You
the
know, so-
organizational bricklayer applies because one of the things that I do, one of the hats, business hats that I wear, is I facilitate pre-construction partnering
right.
workshops. So
Right.
I'm dealing with extremely left brain
Yes.
construction people, and I'm getting them on the same page, getting them to agree to behave a certain way towards each other, and just working out all of these things so that the project becomes the boss, not their egos, not their own agendas,
Right.
but I call it jobarchy, where the job's boss and everybody wins. And so being able to apply these kinds of things in that kind of environment really has helped me hone that skill.
Yes.
To really,
Way better than me, because the gentleman I was talking about, stepping into his gift, he invented a quantum electric motor and discovered things that it could do that kind of just blew science away.
right,
And we were trying to get it developed. It was 2008. Everything was against us, but we would meet up with investors and business people, and they were, I'll give you 15 minutes, and 2 hours later, they're still talking to him, because he's just one of those people that he could see solutions.
right.
They would talk about and he blah, 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 and so they were fascinated with him. And then you see them busy talking about that, and they suddenly look at me and you go, you see me, don't you? And it's like, this was the facade of them, and they knew I was seeing the internal of them,
Sure.
and it freaked them right out. So it wasn't a good place for me to be.
Those moments are so cool. And you just described bricklayer, right? That they see solutions that nobody else
Yes,
sees.
yes. And he just, I mean, he walked into one place and they had a problem, and he just went, okay, and there it was, a problem they had had for months, something they just couldn't see. And
Fresh
they just,
eyes.
I bet you, when you look at him, there was nothing to kind of match what you think he should look like. And
Sure.
he had actually broken his back when he was young. He died. He had numerous things that this guy, he was just totally, and that's why we dated, and people would look at and go, huh? But we were connected, that
Oh,
soul
it's a
talk.
much deeper level
Oh yeah,
where things like
our
that.
souls, when they
Yeah,
dance, they were just, oh my goodness, fireworks. I mean, we would just go up into the stratosphere. So
that's
yeah,
awesome.
it was really
And it's
great.
wonderful, and not to dissuade that the development of relationships and the recognition that we may have many soul
Oh yes,
mates
exactly. Yes.
until we have that, or maybe not have that twin flame kind of
Right.
engagement where, and ours is so bizarre. I mean, we would utter the same sounds
Yeah.
at the same time.
No,
We
you
say
were
the same.
definitely heart connectors. Yeah.
It's such,
Yeah.
and we do that and we look at each other and, wow, that was kind of spooky cool, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is.
Yes. Well,
And
we were
yet,
soul igniters to each other. We were there to ignite each other's possibilities, right? And set us on this path. And he eventually went his path, artificial intelligence for
well, I think when
Microsoft
people
now.
come together, even at soul levels, you're there, soulmates, twin
Yeah.
flames, whatever, at that
At that time, for that
harmonic
reason. Yeah,
frequency level
exactly.
for
And
that
it doesn't mean
time.
it is meant to be forever. It's
No.
like an igniter. And if it ends up,
Well,
going
there
off in
again,
different
that's our
direction.
nature to want
Yeah.
to compartmentalize,
Yes.
define, say, okay, now this is how it is,
Yeah.
right? And as soon as we grab it,
Right.
it's gone.
We want to canal it. No, it's not meant to be that. I mean,
Right.
energy. I it, everything in our body has to flow. The oxygen, the energy, the blood, everything has to flow. The world out there, when it becomes stagnant, that's when it has a problem. The air, the water, everything needs to flow. That's what energy is about. It's about movement.
Yep.
Right? And it has
Absolutely.
different frequencies, and it's not meant to have a high pitch and a low. It's meant to be that wonderful flow of rhythm of life. And when you can step into your own rhythm of your own flow, that means you're always going to be with you wherever you go.
Sure. Now, I've been fortunate that a lot of it I was able to I had time, and I'd been asked to write a book for a long time. So in 2001, I started writing, and by 2010, I had a series finished that had, kind of decades of my life. And then 2017, I reworked it, republished it as Stubbing My Toe
Yes,
on Purpose.
which I like that title.
And well, and the subheading, is a seminal view of consciousness, cosmology, and the
Yeah.
congruence of science and spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So it was my story of my life, the experiences, and not just that. It wasn't just an autobiography. It was the questions and the experiments and the concerns and the deeper things that most people don't necessarily go to in exploring those things. Because you have an experience, you don't necessarily question why or how or what enabled it to happen. Because there is, in the scientific method, there is a process repeatability.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That doesn't mean the details have to be the same.
Right.
There's a process that is, and it's every time you make one of those spiral loops,
Mm-hmm.
that process is in play. And the better you can learn how to play with it,
Mm-hmm.
or let it play you, then the more you can ascend to this new living awareness, and how that plays out in your life is you do have the things that you've desired. You have the love, you have the stuff, but you don't have an overabundance of stuff. You've got what you need, and you're
exactly. And then you realize how enriched and abundant you really are.
Absolutely.
Right? Because that's what truly the enrichment and abundance is. My bank account absolutely does not match my inner abundance or my enrichment of life. Not at all. It just keeps me afloat. Fine. It keeps me alive enough to do what I'm here to do, but I am so enriched and abundant in everything that I've become and that I get to do. And you're talking about that, it's a spiral conveyor belt. It's like the channel. It doesn't matter what you put on that conveyor belt, but it's always got that beautiful upward swing. And that's the mechanics of being able to kind of. There's some people that are really good at just being able to channel when they need to channel. Others, it comes in when it comes in. And how many people are conduit writers? I put my fingers on the keyboard, and next thing you know, I'd written this book, and I have no idea what the hell I wrote until I read it. Right? Because they were conduit writers, because they opened up that conveyor belt, and that knowledge just came right down.
I've heard that called automatic writing initially.
Yes.
And yeah, I've had my first introduction to it was shortly after I had the white light experience. I had heard the voice say, pick up a pen and paper and write.
Yeah.
I happened to be listening to George Harrison's Living in the Material World album at the time, right? So, I mean, everything, the setups that we get are just so perfect. And so I sat down and I wrote, and I had 3 pages of what looked like Sanskrit.
Yes.
I had no idea what it said.
Right.
And then I took it around to the teachers at Ball State, and none of them, one of them said, it's BS. And so I thought, there's something to this. Otherwise, it wouldn't have,
it wouldn't have come out of you.
I felt connected to it. The part of it was a story about me.
Yeah.
Right? So later that week, I had a friend that lived on the other side of the dorm who grew up in a metaphysical family and who could do automatic writing. And so I approached him and I said, hey, Jim, could we get together this weekend and see if you could, I'd just been introduced to my guide, Zephyr, as well. And I thought that might have been him. And I said, well, is there a chance that you might be able to tune in? We could ask some questions. He said, yeah, let's try it, find out. So I didn't show him the writing, right? I know enough to not put those things to taint the evidence or taint the process in any way. So we got together, And he did his thing, tuned in, started writing the same type of script. And I'm like, oh man, I can't read this. Can you? He said, no. I said, that's the same thing that I wrote earlier this week. He said, weird. I said, well, is it possible for you to tune in to, ask your guide to be an interpreter?
Right.
He said, don't know, never tried it.
Uh-huh.
Let's do it, see what happens. Right. And that's how things happen. So tuned in, turned out that Zephyr was from what is now the southwestern United States over 20,000 years ago. He was a shaman for that established the community. And it was a fairly large one, I guess. And so, we're in Ball State, Muncie, Indiana. Right. So I'm thinking long term, oh man, I'd love to go live there. Well, 4 years later, it happened. And that we moved to Arizona. A strange set of occurrences. So then I started having more of a relationship with Zephyr. But at the same time, here's this separate reality. I was also reading Castanada's books and things at the time too. And it seems like a separate reality to most people because it's so, the evidence of it is nonlinear, non-local, and oftentimes multidimensional.
Yes.
And we just don't know how to equate it or how to process it well enough, let alone talk to somebody about it, because everybody thinks we're nuts.
Well, I mean, the multidimensional experience is a true experience. It's just happening on a different plane. That's all.
And more people understand that now than have throughout history, because there are more people having it, even extraterrestrial experiences and things of that nature, or multidimensional, or ultra-terrestrials, intraterrestrials. We don't know, right? Because they're definitely not of this dimension, because they fade in and out of it.
Exactly.
And so, there's all these kinds of things happening. The government's finally saying, oh yeah, we've got some photos and we've seen things. And, and yet I actually met Edgar Mitchell years ago. It's an event that I was managing. It's called the Prophets Conference. We had, I think it was 5,000 people through the weekend, 30 some odd speakers, and I ran the event, which gave me the opportunity to go talk to people, right?
Yes,
and to address them in a much different way. Well, I saw Edgar coming out into our green room, which was outdoors, and I noticed he pulled a pouch of drum tobacco out of his back pocket. And I'm thinking, why? Because I had one too. And
time for a little pipe.
Right. So no, it was rolling tobacco. So I walked up, and as I was walking up, he turned to look at me, and I made sure that he could see me pulling that pouch of drum tobacco out of my back pocket. And I said, hey, do you mind if we share smoke? And just the way that I said that, I could see him soften. We got into this conversation about tobacco and Native Americans. And we had several conversations over the weekend. And evidently it built his trust up in me, because I shared some of my extraterrestrial experiences as well. And he says, at one point, he says, I want to tell you something, but you got to promise me not to say anything until after I'm dead. Because if you do, I can be in big trouble.
Right.
Like, okay, cool. I was just honored that he was willing to go there. And he trusted me enough to know that my word's my bond. So he says to me, when we were going down towards the surface in the LEM, I saw this metallic silver cylinder spiraling around the LEM all the way down to the surface. He said, I don't know if it was one or many, because it was just a really small window that they had to look out. He says, definitely, it was either piloted or controlled from the surface, but it definitely wasn't ours.
Right.
And so that kind of made me think, well, I'd heard that Neil and Buzz had seen similar cylinders standing on a rectangular platform just on the dark side of the moon. I'd heard that through the ufology grapevine 15 years before that. So this, or 10 years anyway. So this kind of gave evidence to that. Now, 2016, Edgar passed. 2017, I started talking about it. And it's just the story makes sense, if nothing else, right?
I mean,
there were these people saying, Edgar never said that. He never told me. Or,
right. Yeah.
Well, duh.
And the thing is, you don't need to prove anything to anybody. You're passing on what he said, and you believed him, and that's that. I, as a child, I saw them. I know I'm not even from this planet. That's why I have such a damn difficult time living here, and I have in every lifetime I've been here,
Well, I used to
because
make
I
trips
know
to
where
the,
I come from, and I know what I meant, with that beautiful light that
yep,
I'm in. And then I come here to all this turmoil, and I'm here to do a job. And it's like, do I have to? Can I come home,
same
please?
here. Nope, this is your home now.
Yeah, no, it is. Yes, it has been for
It is.
a few thousand years. But
Now,
yeah,
I
I
had
just want that same peace to be here as one from where I came from.
one of the things I went through as a kid, time I was 8 to 10 years old, I would watch myself get out of bed, climb out my bedroom window, walk across the neighbor's
Mhm.
backyard, climb a fence, walk out into a 10-acre pasture, and rise up into an orange cigar-shaped cloud.
Yeah.
And I did this twice a month for almost 2 years.
Hmm.
Didn't know what it was, just couldn't wait to go back, because my
Exactly.
observer would watch the participant, and as my physical body would get close to the cloud, the observer would become one with it, and I'd move into the cloud, and I'd wake up in bed the next morning, couldn't wait to go back. Well,
Exactly.
23 years old, a couple of weeks before we moved to Arizona, I'm walking through a metaphysical bookstore in Muncie, Indiana, and this book falls off the shelf in front of me. Nobody else around. And
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, cool, something's going on.
Always in
And I
it. Hey,
walk over,
pay attention.
and the cover of the book was facing up, and it was Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us.
Mm.
So I pick the book up where it's open, flip it over, and the first paragraph that I read, paraphrased, says, the most common contactee experience in the late 50s and early 60s in the Midwest was the orange cigar-shaped cloud.
Mm.
And so that was 15 years.
Mm.
And I went, oh.
Right.
And it was like a domino, because so many things made sense.
Yeah, that it never happened to me physically like that. I was a very sickly child from the age of
Mhm.
2, and I spent many, 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 many hours on my own in my room.
Mhm.
And so it just became of, I can't live here. And I would be, and then later I'll be talking about certain memories. You never did that. You were never there. And I kind of was confused as a child. What do you mean? I did this, I did that, that. No, no, you never did that. And it was, I then learned, kind of don't really discuss it,
Well, it sounds like
maybe
out of body
a
experience,
total out of
or
body
even by
experience.
location.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it was very much, I've got some wonderful memories, which I realized I have never done in this body. And it's, and I think it was, I always believe things come for a reason. I got the Asian flu when it went around England, and I ended up getting asthma, and I never outgrew it. I've had it now for 65 years, right?
Hmm.
So never outgrown it. And I think that it was there for a reason. And, it was to switch me off from everything else around
Sure.
me and allow me to go and do this. But as a child, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't do this? What do you mean you don't see
Right.
them? What do you mean you don't do that? And then it's kind of, you get teased or you get ridiculed and you learn to shut up. But then you can't, because all of a sudden you find yourself doing things and saying things and seeing things that you have to share, because it's out of your mouth before you know it.
Right. My first psychiatrist recommended, it's funny, after he told me that I wasn't crazy and I'd gone through a spiritual awakening, he says, hey, I want to show you something. He takes me upstairs he's got his office in a historic home in Anderson, Indiana, 2-story. We walk up top stairs, he opens the door, my heart chakra just explodes. And I'm looking in the room, there's all kinds of metaphysical books and posters and stuff hanging from the ceiling. And right inside the door is a card table with a deck of tarot cards on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at him, because totally uncharacteristic of
Right.
what you would think, right?
Yeah.
And he looks at the cards and says, you know what those are? I said, yeah, they're tarot cards. He said, you know what they're for? I said, yeah, you ask them questions, and then you do a spread or whatever it's called, and you get answers. And he said, have you ever had your cards read? And I said, no. And he said, would you like to? And I said, absolutely.
Mm.
So he does reading, and afterwards he says, my best advice to you is just keep your mouth shut, because people aren't going to understand you at your age, carrying
Right.
the wisdom that you do. Well, as you can tell, I'm kind of a blabbermouth. I don't know how to keep my mouth shut.
Yes.
Um,
And we're not meant to. We're part of the awakeners, so we have to speak.
no, we just learn how to articulate
Yes.
better so that the message gets through
Right.
how it's intended. And
Yes.
that's the thing that probably is the most challenging for folks like us, is that people never hear us from where we speak.
No, no.
right? There's always this filter in place that is either highly critical or discounting or ego focused or self-important, whatever.
Yeah.
But they're not fully present in the moment and just listening. Like I called it earlier, the intellectual humility
Mm-hmm.
that it takes to hear something that's outside of your direct experience and just be okay with it.
Right. And it's sometimes, we will hear things, we will be given things, and we have no idea what it is or what to do with it. That's okay.
Mhm.
That's all right, because it will be revealed when it needs to be revealed. They're just letting you know it's there.
Yep.
Then okay. All right. Now I know. But, it's this need to actually understand and dissect and go deep into it all in the moment. No,
No.
it's
Well,
like
it's like
kind of,
destructive testing. Where did they ever come up with that idea of destroying something in order to figure out how it's made? Why don't you
right.
just step back, maybe ask the questions? How
Yes.
are you made? Right?
You're
Because
right.
there's consciousness in everything, and the universe has no secrets. We just have to ask the right question.
Yeah, doing not a biopsy, autopsy before they're dead. It's the same principle. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I can tell you, and I've seen a lot of psychiatrists in my time, and it always me ended up counseling them. And they
Right.
said, but this is not what you're here for. And I said, clearly I am.
Well, Jeff Mishlev has a doctorate in parapsychology. He was the only doctorate out of UC Berkeley, from what I understand. It took him 3 years just to get the program approved. So you can imagine, and here's a guy that's interviewed hundreds, probably over 1,000 by now, of
Yeah.
people that had something to do with parapsychology. Like Lynn Buchanan, who was one of the remote viewers that the government used.
Mm-hmm.
And his story is rather unique as well. But one of the things that Jeff said about my book was my level of being able to report objectively
Mm-hmm.
on subjective experiences.
Right.
And
Well, I don't know if I can do that. I don't think I'm,
it's a learned skill, I
yeah,
think,
no,
because you question it enough times. It's like, okay, what really, and you learn it's that part of yourself that observes everything and then
yes.
can report on what it observes because it's not in an emotional place.
No, it's almost like you've got a black screen behind you with things on it, and it's like that black space is that you're in that space, of nothingness, where you know what you need to know at the moment, and it's really hard to actually explain that. And it's like,
No,
but
it's an experience that
it is,
unless you have
and
a direct experience of it, you're not going to be able to comprehend
no,
what it is,
no, and it's
as much
extremely
as you
hard to
emotionally
articulate it.
try.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm obviously in my realm going to be speaking to people that need whatever I need to say at that time. But where you have the gift is being able to intellectualize it in a way that people can grasp it and be more inquisitive as to what it is, where
Right.
I'm a little bit more of the woohoo.
Well, it helps me because on the flip side, so I mentioned the partnering, that's in the group setting. My individual transformational coaching, I deal with entrepreneurs, small
Mm,
business owners, artisans, folks that are in a life process that
yes,
want to adjust. And so by being able to connect with them, to really listen empathically and create the generative conversations where I'm asking questions that get them to dig deeper because they've got the answers, right?
yes, they just don't know how to access them.
Right. And so I know how to access them.
Mm,
And by being able to do so, their growth and their
yeah,
trajectory just dramatically changes. And not does it just change, but they are able to take what they learn with them.
yeah.
And that to me is more valuable than anything. I'm not like the old shrinks or docs or therapists or whatever. I don't string people along. There's, because you have that. Here's my book of business, right? And I want to make sure that I can string them along for as long as possible and guide them so that they come to me because I'm their crutch. I don't want to,
Dependent, yeah,
right. I don't
dependencies.
want to be your crutch.
No,
I want to
be a
be
liberator.
I'm just a coach,
Yes.
right? and you want to go this direction, okay, we'll go this direction. I'll share with you ways to get there, and I'll help you build the skill set that's necessary to do so, and then you take it with you.
Yeah, and if, igniters, kind of switch you on to that channel. Now you're aware of it. All right. My knowledge now has been done. It's your journey of life now to explore and meet other people along the way that are going to share the knowledge that you need to know on your journey of life. So there isn't going to be any one person that's going to have it all for you. They're going to be that igniter, or they're going to be that knowledge that you need to meet along the way.
Thoughts along the path, or
yeah,
the line, whether it's linear or not linear,
yeah,
you never
exactly.
know,
Whatever the
right?
path is,
Yeah.
that the swirl, the twirl, you will meet who you need to meet with whatever information that they have for you at that time. And there is no chance meeting, everything is there when it's meant to be. I have a course myself where I'm a True Colors teacher, but I also have a View of Life program. And it's amazing how many people who go through life being switched off, not paying attention, not understanding what the signs are that are telling you. And when we can learn to be more aware, also understand from which perspective we come from, because that's how we are integrating
Well, that comes
and
with the
listening.
self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly.
As you know you, that's back to the
You are better
NYS,
to
right?
actually understand what's going on around you.
Right. And you can't understand what's going around you until you understand what's going on within you. That's where
Exactly.
the self-love comes in. You
Yes.
have to love yourself unconditionally, be okay with everything. You're not perfect. None of us are,
Your
and it's
flawsomeness.
okay.
Your
And it's
flawsomeness. That's the beauty of
right,
it, right? Yeah.
awesomeness. I
Yes.
like that. Um, that's a cool term. And it just stopped me dead. It's like, stop me
you know,
live. I'm sorry. I don't want to be dead. I
we
already am.
stopped you
It
in your
doesn't matter.
tracks.
Dead,
We
live.
stopped you in your
No, it's all
tracks.
the same.
Yeah.
So what that does, though, is it gives you the ability to embrace yourself. And by so doing, then you begin to understand others, because you understand your own process.
Right.
And you see things from a different place. You may
Right.
not always be 100% accurate. At least you have a better idea of what might be going on in that other person, because you
Yes.
recognize your own behaviors in them.
Relatability. Yes. And
Right.
that's the reason why we're drawn to certain people. You relate to them. You see a similar experience, or a synergy that is there, and that is just opening up the door to you and
Mm-hmm.
you to them. There's an exchange of wonderful energies of information. And if we could stop trying to intellectualize everything and open up again to that wonderful flow of divine wisdom, we would actually understand that the knowledge is all there. And when we're more in tranquility with self, we're going to be able to access it. And if it's not there in that moment, it's not meant to be there in that moment. It will come to you when you need it. Just go
Right.
with the flow, and it will reveal.
Now, one of the other things too, going back into the educational realm and identifying the ways in which we learn, the three basic ones, the audio, kinesthetic, and visual. So that then is expanded in Gardner's multiple intelligences. And so these are all ways, the rhythm, musical rhythmic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, visual, spatial, all of these. I think there's 8 total, maybe 9 with the spiritual side of things, which brings them all together. These are all the nuances in the ways that we learn, and they're not any specific ones that we have, because they're all part of that unified, the holistic picture of
Yes.
who we are.
They're all part of that orchestra.
Right.
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 Exactly. I mentioned the Borg earlier. When people talk about becoming one and the collective, it's like, abstaining from being you and handing yourself over, which is so far from what the one is. It's being part of that collective energy where your particular frequency, it's like the cellular structure in our body. If one cell starts to die, it starts affecting all the other cells around it, and then the cellular structure breaks down. If we can look upon ourselves as a very important, plump, juicy, energetic cell, then we're going to serve the cells around us collectively. And as a whole cellular structure, we're going to be pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And it's a wonderful thing.
It is.
what's surprising is that it is so simple and easy, yet we choose to try to make it, very
Yeah.
complex because we don't trust it, right? We
No,
still,
we've got to justify it. We've got to verify it. It's got to be proven to us. Yet people pray to a God that they don't see. Right? Yeah. Why
who
you?
provides things that they deny or reject.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and there is no. You have to go to church to talk to God. That God energy is with you all the time. You are a part of it, and vice versa. And again, you could switch those channels anytime you want, and pay attention. And I think a lot of it is learning to read the signs in life, right? Having the balance, learning to read the signs in life. I know that you're going to get given. I get given information all the time, and it's like I have to sit with it. Does my core agree? If my core doesn't agree, dismiss it. If my core
Or wait
agrees,
until further understanding
right,
occurs.
yes. But if my core is absolutely no, then I know it's not meant to be. It's just an outside information that's
Sure.
come to me.
Yep.
When my core goes, yes, and you go, well, I'm not quite sure what it means, doesn't matter. It's a yes.
Yep.
Just go, just go. It will be revealed. And there's so many people who are so scared to take their journey of life because they want to know, what are the steps? Well, where do I go next? Where do I go next? Instead of just participate in your own life and put one foot in front of the other.
It's like jumping off the
Open-mindedly, open-heartedly.
precipice, not realizing you have wings.
Mm-hmm. Yet we can fly.
Yep. And we do.
We do. We do all the time. Yes. I mean, I think it's, rather arrogant of us to think that there isn't any other life forms in the universe or here amongst us. And I think it's sad that we limit ourselves so much by believing we are just matter. Have you seen Doctor Strange? The movie Doctor Strange?
Yes.
Benedict. There's a wonderful scene where his shaman pushes him outside of his body and says, what do you think you are? Just matter? And then he realized he's an entity. The matter is a vehicle for
Yep.
that entity. And I thought, oh, yes, so wonderful to actually see that in a movie where people can start questioning it and go, what?
Sure.
What?
There are many movies
Yes.
now that
Avatar.
have those multiple perspectives
Yes.
of what's happening, and including on the flip, the not so good side with the two different versions of Utopia.
Yes.
One of them John Cusack's in. And so it's like, okay, guys, here's kind of what's going on. It ought to be pretty obvious, and yet we miss it. That's okay, because we're still learning and growing as a human race, and these are things that we don't necessarily, we want to be nice to ourselves. We want to have compassion for ourselves and others.
Yes.
And just say, okay, well, yeah, it's all right. We'll do better, right? And just the effort of putting one foot in front of the other and staying the course, not giving up. And it goes back to the old, the business building, the entrepreneurial stories, the even educational stories, is that you keep moving forward no matter what the distractions are, if you want to reach your goal. You start with the end in mind, and then you back up the steps that it takes to get there, because as you're questioning the how, okay, so this is wonderful, I see this now, how does that happen? Okay, these are the 30,000 foot view items that take place in order for it to happen. Okay, now how do those things happen? Well, you break it down to the next level, which may be a project management level, and then you break it down to a supervisory level, and you break it down to a worker level, those kinds of things, to put it in the metaphor of a manufacturing firm, right? So life is that way. And we're project managers.
Yes. Yes.
And we have the ultimate authority of how we think, what we do, the choices we make, the actions we take. It came to me some time ago, we were talking about articulating things simply, right? Attention, intention, and interaction. Wherever our focus is in those three areas is what we're going to manifest. Law of attraction states this.
Yes, exactly.
We don't for a long time, the idea or the notion was that all I have to do is think and feel these things and I'm going to attract them. That's part of it. You still
Just,
have to act as if it's
yes.
going to
It's
show
not an
up.
Amazon delivery.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
In
an
some
interaction.
cases, if you're really good, it may be. Those
Yeah.
possibilities exist and we cannot deny them, right? Because they do happen. However, on a regular basis, it's the activity that you're in.
Yes.
John English calls it a momentum tunnel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you commit to something,
Yeah.
then the universe fully commit, which means in this day and age, you have to commit your life. You have to be willing to die for what you believe in,
Right.
right?
And people may get scared of the death, and that, yeah, some people do physically die, but it is a death of who you were,
Mhm.
or what your thought process was, what your perspective was, and more of an opening up of becoming the love you seek, becoming the peace you seek, becoming the solution we all seek, and being willing to take that journey in the right energy of
Sure.
exploration.
And if you question the NDE stuff, the near-death experiences, then find some material.
Yes.
Eben Alexander is a good example. There's a lot of doctors and lawyers
Mm,
and professional people who've
yes.
had these experiences that have written books about them, and
Yes.
they may not see things completely clear because they still have these filters in place.
Right.
Because most of those um, types of NDEs happen through traumatic
Mm-hmm.
situations, right? Unlike mine was completely volitional, which
Mm-hmm.
I find is kind of unique and rare,
Yeah.
right? And yet it's still the same thing. I just
Right.
happen to be more available and aware of the process so that I could ask better questions going
Yeah, you were more
forward.
engaged in the process, and it wasn't a process that happened to you out of trauma.
Right.
Hmm.
And then you had to play catch up,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
I'd
Exactly.
prefer mustard. Thank you.
We need to come to an end. We do, because we could
Oh,
carry on talking. I know it's very, very easy to do.
time for the sandwich then.
But your books, how do people get it? Stubbing My Toe on Purpose, and how do people get hold of you to help you with the work, the work that you're doing on your One World TV? Please share all of that information with us.
Sure. Well, I have some of it prepared behind me. The link for my Amazon, and I think I've got 18 books up there,
Wow.
um, is amazon.com/author/Zendor.
Hmm.
And the podcast that I came off a 30-year hiatus from the first One World, it's called One World in a New World. And I term them as apocalyptic chats. And apocalypse simply means unveiling knowledge,
Right.
right? So that's where we're in today. So it's the youtube.com/C/One World in a New World. Now, my coaching is pretty simple. It's bethedream.com. So if you've got a dream, you want to achieve it, I'm the guy to come to.
Right.
And then the partnering is teampartnering.com. And those applications for the team building aren't specific to the construction industry. They work everywhere.
Right. I mean, building blocks, it's just a question of how you put them together. They can serve so many arenas. It's there's always a structure needed, right? There's always a foundation you needed. You need a foundation in your belief. You need a foundation in anything.
Well, there's science and math and
Yeah,
everything. So there's
exactly.
structure. You just
Yes.
have to understand that structure exists and learn how to navigate the parameters
Yeah.
within the structure. And when you can do that, then you can begin to venture outside the structure a little bit and pull new stuff in too.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is, the volume is being turned up on this now for quite some time, and it keeps being turned up and turned up, which is the invitation into that awakening. And so many people are going, oh, gosh, I'm just not what the hell is happening? I'm suddenly aware of this and I'm suddenly aware of that. And I say, yeah, and now it's just a question of people like us to guide them on their way to their own meaningful purpose, to their own particular beingness.
Yep.
But the more people that wake up, the more we're actually elevating the frequency, the more we're serving the planet, the more we're serving humanity, and the more we're serving the universe, because we're all in this together. So one destruction means a destruction across the board.
And I would go so far as to say we are destined to move into a new layer of consciousness and activity as a humanity.
Yeah, that's the only way we're going to survive here on this planet. It's the only way we're going to survive.
That's true. And this emergence, this is a natural order of evolution.
Yes. Just get with the game, folks. Get with the flow. Don't be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of. Come on in. The waters are wonderful. Absolutely. It's a wonderful experience. It's an expansion of you, of your wonderful beingness. You've lived in a limited world of expectation or, dictation of what you should be. Start exploring who you really are, why you're really here. You start opening up your eyes, your heart and soul.
Your dictation from.
Yeah, exactly. And I think take the word dictation out of it altogether. Use the word allow. Allow the world of the universe to show you where you are really meant to go. And that, all the people that I've interviewed that have gone through the real heavy cosmic 2x4, where they've lost everything and they've had to come back up, going through that process of healing and in that self-discovery of who they are and why they are and what they're doing today. They will never change a thing, however traumatic it was, but who they are today, what they represent, the truth of themselves, and the light that they live in and the light that they share was what they were always meant to be. But it took that, catastrophic thing to happen in order to set them on the path. We don't all have to have the cosmic 2x4. We can all wake up to that awareness. I really do need to have to start implementing the change, which means the blinkers have got to come off, the heart and soul have to open, and I need to start immersing into listening to my feelings.
Now, oftentimes that's that emotional trauma, physical trauma, intellectual trauma, spiritual trauma initiates the change. And the challenge of remaining the same is so uncomfortable that change has to take place. Interesting. And I know we're close on time. This is a little phrase that came up in my second master's degree, and that was challenge to change. There's only 3 letters difference. The LLE in challenge, you take it out, it becomes change. So I see that as personal liabilities, limitations, and excuses. And once you can figure out what those are, because you do have them, because you're telling yourself all the time. Then those can dissipate, even disappear, and you automatically will have the change that you desire.
Right. Be the change you seek. But it means that you have to be interactive and proactive in your own life. It's not going to happen by just willing it. It's going to happen by your participation, your openness,
willingness. To have your heart broken multiple times to do so.
Yes. And you know what? The way your heart comes back together, it is beautiful. When we look at a diamond, it isn't one pure glass. It's fragmented in so many different fractals. That's absolutely wonderful. And that's what makes it stronger. And that's what makes it so beautiful. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of falling down. Don't be afraid of anything shattering. It's just dismissing and realigning into your true strength.
There's soft pillows.
Yes, yes. Some of us had to bounce. Well, thank you so much, Zen, for sharing with us today. And of course, bethedream.com, and on YouTube, it's One World in a New World. One World in a New World, and just tune into all of his shows that he's got there too. And if you really feel that he's the great coach for you, it's coach@bethedream.com. And his book is on Amazon. Don't forget to reach out to it. And The reason why we are doing what we're doing and have made the journey ourselves is so that we can share that experience and that support and that guidance. It doesn't mean we
Speaking of
know it all.
sharing, let me offer this one last thing. Um, I do have a personal website, it's zenbenefiel.com, and there is a pay it forward page there that I give away several of my books. So finances are tight right now for you, and you need something just to nurture your soul, go there and you'll see the PIF in the menu above. And just
Wonderful.
click on that, and so you'll be able to download several.
Excellent. Wonderful. Really,
Information
we've
is
got
more
no
important than the money, right?
excuses. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've got
exactly.
no excuses. You know that all of the hands are there. They're not there to do it for you. They're not there for you to paint by numbers, but we are there to help you get up. We are there to help you with the information to put in your backpack to take forward on your own journey. And there are many of us along the way, and you will meet us if you allow yourself at the time that you need to meet us. But just be willing to take the journey.
Yep.
Open heart, open spirit, open souled, open minded.
Open source.
Open source, yes, source of energy. Let it come through. We're never alone, folks, never. And the more you immerse yourself into this, the more you realize what that oneness is that we're talking about. So thank you so much, Zen.
Namaste and in la Sarah.
Merci. And to everyone else out there, please be willing to take the journey. We need you, the world needs you, and you need yourself. Until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. Please tune in to our selfdiscoverymedia.com/shows and you will see all the other genres that we have from you. Every week on Tuesday, we bring you new shows from illuminating people. If you know someone that should be interviewed, please contact us at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com. Now stay tuned for your next show.